So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to. So we are back with a brand new movie on what if Naruto was the Incredibles' unexpected nanny. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. Inside a dark room with several private military types that were more like cartoon henchmen ready to get punched at a moment's notice. In the center of the room is a man wearing a white and black superhero costume with a large S on his chest and orange hair in a troll doll style and wearing a cape. Currently he was facing a oval ring that holds a red suited superhero with metal gauntlets holding him in place currently with his arms around a woman with platinum blonde hair threatening to kill the woman if Syndrome did not free him. Syndrome cackled madly as he says, "Oh, Mr. Incredible threatening to kill someone. Like that would happen." Incredible simply says, "It will be easy, like snapping a toothpick." Syndrome smirks and says, "Prove it," he says with a knowing look as Mr. Incredible released the woman leaving his arms to the side in defeat. Syndrome simply says, "I knew you were always weak." He turned around and starts to leave the room while saying, "And I have outgrown you," leaving the room with most of the guards left while the woman stood up. The woman frowns before saying to the remaining guards, "Leave him to mourn," and left with the remaining guards leaving Mr. Incredible alone to grieve the loss of his family. "Who was it that died?" asked a man to the side, sounding drunk and in a pod to the side that Mr. Incredible noticed had a slit for whoever was inside to see, and he apparently sounded very drunk. Mr. Incredible looked at the strange capsule and asks, "Who are you?" "Another hero they captured to fight that robot. Actually I just appeared one day and was chased around the island for a couple months before they caught me inside this large white room with these black ball things that expanded," the drunk man in the pod answered before adding, "But a hero. Not really, if I was I wouldn't even be here." Mr. Incredible frowns at that before saying, "My family, my wife probably visited the one who made my suit and gave her a tracker. Though I have no idea why she would bring the kids." The drunk voice in the pod chuckles and says, "They probably followed her without her knowing. I mean when I was younger I would sneak out of class and pull pranks and almost never get caught except for my teacher." The voice started chuckling in nostalgia and spent the rest of the night making childish comments. Mr. Incredible looked at his pod during that time before seeing a chemical formula, Cobratoxin MR7000. Mr. Incredible spent the whole night trying to remember what that was before closing his eyes and formulating what the answer could be. Never noticing the flashing light on the container stating that the chemical was empty. Outside the facility dawn forest floor. After almost being fried to defeat by the exhaust of the rocket launching during the night, one would be expected to be able to sleep in. Unfortunately for one 16-year-old Violet Parr that was not to happen as she opened her eyes to see that she was wearing a red and black super suit and mask with orange headband keeping her long dark blue hair out of her eyes. She was awoken by the energetic shoving of her 11-year-old brother, Dash, who is wearing the same costume as her only without the headband. Dash spoke, "It's a talking bird." Violet looked at the blue bird strangely as the bird spoke, voice key, incorrect. "Wait a minute," Violet starts to say before the bird started squeaking loudly with glowing red eyes, while Violet shouts, "Dash run." But the two started running away as the bird followed them from the air. Dash shouts, "What is going on?" "That bird is a security camera." Violet shouts as she increases her pace to keep up with Dash. They would run for a full 10 minutes before they would be surrounded by henchmen who arrived riding what appeared to be flying saw blades. There is 5 of them aiming their weapons at the 2 young masked heroes, 2 of which were staring at Violet with a hungry grin that made her nervous before she turned invisible and spoke to a surprised Dash. "Dash, remember what Mom said." Dash was confused until Violet says, "Run." With that Dash understood what she meant and started running. One of the henchmen said, "They're supers." Before he and 2 others took their aircrafts they chased after Dash, while the 2 henchmen who had been looking at Violet remained as she did her best to sneak away. Only they heard her move in a certain direction and started walking after her while taunting her to get her to show herself and they wouldn't hurt her too much. Back with Mr. Incredible that moment. Mr. Incredible was apparently sleeping as Mirage snuck her way into the room checking the controls to the pod, which had several flashing lights indicating warnings, but instead she disabled them as the pod was depressurizing the pod as she walks over to the controls that hold Mr. Incredible in the oval. Mr. Incredible was dropped as his bindings were disconnected from as he landed in a crouch and slowly stood up. Mirage goes to help him up as the pod finished depressurizing and it slowly opened like a door as a hand clawed out. Mirage was then suddenly lifted into the air by her throat as Mr. Incredible glared at her and asks, "What else could you possibly do to make my life worse?" He was ready to kill her. Instead Mirage managed to speak, "Your family is alive," she said between gulps of air as she was suddenly dropped and then pulled into a hug by Mirage. Which was poorly timed as a woman in a suit just like Mr. Incredible stepped into the chamber and Mr. Incredible said, Helen. Mirage stood up quickly, cleaning herself up before stepping towards Helen and saying, hello, you must be Mrs. Incredible, only to receive a stretched fist sailing through the air and into Mirage's jaw. The result being that Mirage falling to the floor and Helen being angry with Mr. Incredible. Mr. Incredible spoke, she was helping me escape. No, that was what I was doing, Helen states as Mr. Incredible catches her fist and pulls her towards him as Helen was saying, let me go, I am mad with you, only for when Helen was in Mr. Incredible's arms, did she was kissed with passion. Once the kiss was over Mr. Incredible says, why would I betray the perfect woman? Helen glares at Mr. Incredible and says, oh now I am the perfect woman. Only to hear a loud chuckle to the side where they see a blonde teen wearing a torn orange jumpsuit with strange undershirt while around his head is a bandana with a metal plate on his forehead with a strange leaf symbol. Though his most obvious feature was the 6 whisker marks on his cheeks. The teen looks at the pair and says, he was telling the truth or at least how he sees it. The teen stretched as he stumbles towards them as the alarms go off around them. Mr. Incredible and Helen was confused what was going on, and then Mirage spoke as the teen stepped over with a drunken walk as he offered a hand to Mirage for her to stand as she spoke, your children tripped the alarm. They are currently being chased through the jungle outside the base. Now our children are in danger. Helen shouts at Mr. Incredible. Then why did you bring them? Mr. Incredible countered as they started running out the room. I did not bring them, they stowed away, so don't put the blame on me, they were out the room. The teen chuckled and says, they seem fun, and started quickly following them as his upper body was slower than his legs as he lazily ran after the 2 heroes who were running through the facility following Helen's route to return to her point of entry, which happened to be the monorail track next to the air hangar. Mr. Incredible smashed his way through a wall and proceeded into the large jungle that covered the island. The teen caught up to them and asks, wow, you guys are fast. Helen looked at him strangely before simply asking, who is this guy? Don't know, all I do know is that they were pumping him with cobra toxin MR7000 or something, Mr. Incredible states as they entered the jungle only for Helen to gasp and Mr. Incredible to ask, what? Cobra toxin is cobra snake venom Bob. Helen states before checking the teen and asking, how long had you been dosed with the venom? Well, the teen said with a sweeping gesture, ever since they caught me, but I lost count of how many seconds after the first day of being gassed. The teen chuckled as the female superhero checked the teen's pulse and found him breathing calmly and completely fine, just heavily drunk. Helen simply says, well it appears he is fine, but he should be checked by a proper doctor. No needles, they suck, the teen states as he chuckles to himself before Mr. Incredible reminds them about the kids. With that they started running back into the jungle as the teen accidentally split away from the 2 older heroes. They went one way while the teen went the correct direction. But Violet that moment. Violet was invisible as the 2 henchmen were slowly tracking her through the jungle, quickly sweeping the area while making comments about what they plan to do to her when they get their hands on her. Violet did her best to calm her breathing before she suddenly held her breath when one henchman got uncomfortable close and stood still, forcing her to cover her mouth in terror. The henchman got unbearably close when she was saved by a blonde teen wearing a torn orange bodysuit who appeared very drunk as he asks, hello young lady, I am looking for 2 children. Have you seen them? Their parents are worried. The teen was looking at the henchman standing next to Violet and appearing to be talking to said henchman. But had both henchmen aimed their guns at the teen. Violet was now out of their sight when suddenly she looked down and then picked up a branch and then hit one of the henchmen down to the ground before being spotted by the other henchman, but instead of being attacked a red-suited blonde sped past and knocked the henchman away. The henchman recovered and aimed at the teen and Violet, only to be knocked down again, this time by Dash who was on top of the guy while shouting, no one touches my sister, as he rapidly punches only to be caught by the henchman and was punched towards the side as the henchman drew his gun. Violet shouts, Dash, before jumping between Dash and the henchman, creating a purple sphere with her and Dash inside the sphere that protected them from the bullets before Dash turned around and ran away after the 2 had a conversation that only they could hear. The teen looked at them go before suddenly running after them while saying, wait, that strange stretchy woman is looking for you, only to suddenly get shot in the back and not moving from the impact. The teen looked at the henchman and asks, is there mosquitoes here? The henchman gulped before nodding yes, causing the teen to say, and I forgot my bug spray, before he started running after the orb of death where he sees several crashed buzzsaw aircrafts along with heavily injured henchmen. The teen chuckled as he followed the trail of destruction and find Mr. Incredible, Helen, Dash and Violet fighting an army of henchmen before Syndrome flew down and caught the family of heroes and the teen paused at the sight and after looking at the heroes before taking a seat in the bushes and starts to meditate and was completely ignored as the family of heroes were moved back to the facility. After 10 minutes the teen suddenly opens his eyes as orange pigment was around his eyes as he was looking annoyed as he stood and started walking back to the facility. Mr. Incredible's high security containment cell half hour later. From left to right, Helen, Mr. Incredible and Violet was bound in metal gauntlets and boots that were using electricity as Syndrome stepped into the room with a remote that turned on a screen that revealed a city with a black orb with wings surrounded by the American military. Syndrome then spoke up, once my robot activates it will terrorize the city, where I will then down and save the day. And with no heroes to save the day I will be seen as a hero. Mr. Incredible glares at Syndrome and says, you killed hundreds of heroes. Just so you could pretend to be one. Syndrome chuckles and says, I will be giving the people what they want. I will give them the standard heroics for a couple years and then when I am old and ready to retire. I will sell my tech to everyone, making everyone super and when everyone is super, no one will be. He turns around and walks away quickly heading to his plane to go save the day. Syndrome left the room when Mr. Incredible started talking about his shortcomings as Violet was breathing deeply before planning to use her powers to escape the electrical bindings, only for a couple henchmen to arrive with a portable circle device like the one they were currently in. The lead henchman says, take the girl, she will make the celebration a bit more fun. Unfortunately Violet recognized the voice and started to panic as she struggled in the bindings. Mr. Incredible simply says, stay away from my daughter and actually managed to move in his bindings. Though they did not get far as suddenly the doors of the cell was suddenly knocked down, revealing the teen with an annoyed look on his face. The teen still appeared drunk as he walked over to the family of superheroes with a simple question he asks Helen, look I could not find your other kid, are you sure that there was another child with you? Helen looked at the crazy teen as the henchmen pulled out their weapons aimed at the teen and opened fire, each shooting a single burst putting holes into the teen's clothes, where he did not seem affected. The teen looked at them with a glare as Helen cleared her throat and says, actually we found our son and daughter. The teen blinked and looked at the two and says, so one kid and a pretty lady. Appeared to want to puke, Mr. Incredible glared at the teen, while Violet blushed. The lead henchman pulled out a pistol and shot the teen at point-blank range that caused a smoke trail of the side of the teen's head and gaining the teen's attention before asking, did you want something? His laid-back response to being shot in the head resulted in the henchman screaming in terror and running away and the teen then asking the Incredibles, what is their problem? Blinking in confusion. Mr. Incredible sighs and says, can you please let us down? So we can go after Syndrome. The teen blinked before looked to the terminal and spending a whole minute before saying, I have no idea what I am doing. Violet sighs and generates a shield around herself and rolled towards the teen before getting far enough away from the electric bindings, resulting in her standing with the heavy gauntlets making it very difficult to lift her arms until the teen lifted them up one at a time and tore them in half so she could use her hands. Violet says, thank you, before directing the teen over and says, this is it, with that she pressed the power button turning off the electricity freeing Violet's family. Helen walked over to the teen and asks, are you injured? They shot you with a lot of bullets, she patted him a bit, resulting in several used bullets to land on the ground after impacting his body. He had some bruises where the bullets impacted only to chuckle when Helen touched one. The teen says, stop it, that tickles. Mr. Incredible simply says, we are wasting time, Syndrome is getting away. With that the Incredibles ran out the room with the teen lazily following them as they ran through the halls of the evil volcano lair. The teen then comments, hey, is this a volcano? Mr. Incredible sighs and admits that was the truth and the teen says, wow, talk about cliché. Even in my world that is where every evil ninja would set up their hideout. Why could he have made his lair somewhere more public and easy to get to, he said with stupidity. Mr. Incredible sighs as they reach an aircraft hangar and says, well Syndrome was the only super villain who actually did it, well at least according to all the villains I fought. They all then stealthily looked inside the main aircraft hangar to find that it was empty of henchmen. The teen though simply asks, well how did you get to this island? Because I was kicked out of my dimension by a crazy rabbit lady with a talking shadow. Mr. Incredible sighs at the stupidity the teen was talking about but answers his question, they had me flying in a submersible airplane, but it is too slow. They then see a Metorham that was shaking lightly as Mr. Incredible entered catching what appeared to be a cork before then closing the door behind him and knocking the henchman inside out before stepping out. Mr. Incredible started running with Helen through the hangar as she says, this is the hangar I saw on the way in, but I don't see any jets. Jets are too slow, Mr. Incredible states confusing Helen. The answer came from Dash who shouts, how about a rocket? This got the other four to rush over. Helen simply says, great, I don't know how to fly a rocket. Violet gave an answer, you don't have to, use the previous rocket's coordinates. Mr. Incredible smirks with pride before sighing as he remembered, Syndrome would have changed the password. How do we use the computer to launch the rocket? The answer came from Mirage in the control room, just say please. The teen simply shouts up to her, hey other strange pretty lady. Did the troll change the password? That caused the Incredibles to look at the teen. Mirage shrugged and says, actually no, but he did not, getting a laugh from Dash and the teen. Helen asks, what was the password? Chronos, the teen and Mr. Incredible answered before Mr. Incredible looked to the teen in surprise asking, how did you know that? The teen blinked before saying, I saw it at this grave under a waterfall. Mr. Incredible blinked but understood that before walking over to the Metroville and removing the henchman quickly before saying, we can use this with the rocket, before smiling at Helen. Helen paused before her eyes widened and says, I thought you were the one who did the heavy lifting. You have the reach, Mr. Incredible says quickly causing Helen to sigh. Helen sighs and says, okay kids get in the motorhome we are going to ride a rocket, causing Dash to whoop in joy. Violet looked to the teen, who had a confused look and asks, what is wrong? What is a rocket? The teen questions in confusion as he was pulled into the motorhome, still a little unsteady from the cobra venom. But that the teen was now sitting next to Dash who was waiting patiently while Violet sat opposite the teen. With that the trio was sitting quietly while Dash appeared very jumpy. As Mr. Incredible was in front of the steering wheel. Helen climbed onto the roof as Mr. Incredible moved the vehicle started to move and the teen suddenly grabbed the table in confusion before it moved and appeared to feel sick to his stomach. Collapsing on the table until the vehicle stopped and the teen asks, what was that? Dad just moved a car, Dash answered and while laughing at the idea of the teen being easily car sick. Violet asks, what is wrong? I don't know I just suddenly felt like I was going to puke, the teen states. Fortunately that was when the motorhome started rotating so that the motorhome was pointing up and was now inside a black circle with wings as the rocket sealed around them, leaving them in darkness and the teen feeling like he was going to puke. A couple minutes later there was a loud rumble before they were pushed back into their seats, with the exception of Violet, who suddenly found herself in the teen's arms, which for her was distracting as she felt solid muscle, and was really happy that they were in the dark so the teen could not see her blush. They were suddenly weightless as they floated and the teen's stomach was audible to everyone. 5 minutes later the rocket leveled off and downwards as gravity slowly returned as the rocket was gliding, with Dash suddenly asking as the lights returned, are we there yet? We will get there when we get there, Mr. Incredible shouts before opening the window next to him, filling the room with wind as Mr. Incredible shouted, how is it going honey? Helen from above shouted back, do I have to answer? I thought her name was Helen, the teen stated before climbing over the table while holding his gut as he walked to the back of the motorhome and knocking a door open to find a toilet and rushed inside with loud gagging noises being heard. Violet simply states, I hope he is okay, she was really concerned. Mr. Incredible simply shouts, okay everyone strap in. Violet and Dash straps in front of the monitors with Violet in front of the big red button. Mr. Incredible opened the passenger side window while shouting out his window, okay honey we are about to drop the wings. Violet, ready. Violet had her hand raised above the button, now. Violet slammed her hand on the button splitting the gliding apparatus causing Helen to shout in pain and then she climbed through the passenger window and into the passenger seat and putting on her seatbelt. The motorhome was falling at an angle at high speed towards the highway into Metroville. Mr. Incredible shouts, everyone hang on. They then crashed into the highway and sped along the road avoiding other vehicles. Mr. Incredible and Helen was arguing with one another on how to get to the financial district. Eventually Mr. Incredible followed Helen's directions and after rolling violently the motorhome parked between two very expensive cars. Everyone was laughing at surviving that crash before they all stopped when the teen stepped out the toilet no worse for wear and just asking, what did I miss? Everyone looked at him strangely before they looked forward and saw the giant black orb robot with 6 legs causing midless destruction. Mr. Incredible spoke, wait here, he stepped out the motorhome with Helen following him quickly and arguing about why Mr. Incredible wanted to fight the giant robot alone. Violet and Dash were watching from the door of the motorhome with the teen standing behind them. Mr. Incredible suddenly shouted while holding Helen and showed a moment of weakness to his family when the teen suddenly grabbed both Violet and Dash before shooting forward as the robot smashed the motorhome. Violet and Dash were safe while the teen rubbed his head for the headache that was forming. Mr. Incredible grabbed a car and threw it towards the robot only to be ignored as the robot targeted the teen. With a metal tentacle slamming down towards him only for Violet to create a shield around the three as the robot repeatedly slammed the shield until suddenly it walked over and slammed down on the shield with its full weight and was caught by the nauseated teen before it could hurt. Violet. The ground below the teen started to crumble as Helen stretched her arms and pulled Violet and Dash away from the robot as Mr. Incredible crouched next to the teen before punching it away from them. The robot rolled away quickly until it was corrected and on its clawed feet. It charged quickly when suddenly a man wearing a white and light blue bodysuit was skiing on ice, creating a path around the robot to freeze the joints of the tentacle legs as he went. Mr. Incredible though shouted, "Frozen," so the teen figured that was the name in question. Helen returned from hiding Violet and Dash as Frozen was sent flying onto a car causing Mr. Incredible to charge the robot shouting, "Hey." Before being thrown away behind the robot before said robot targeted the teen and slapped him away quickly and into a building. Helen dodged an attack by jumping onto the building to the side. Only she was completely ignored while Frozen froze the robot as it charged after the teen. Violet looked at the robot then at the teen while asking aloud, "Why is it so focused on?" She paused at that before asking, "Wait, we never asked for his name." Dash chuckled before seeing Mr. Incredible throw another car at the robot. Where was Syndrome at this point? He was still 10 minutes away from the city as he used a jet to fly there after activating the robot as soon as he left the island. The robot continued to charge after the teen and started smashing the ground as the teen stumbled around the wild swings before suddenly an orb made by Violet sped towards him with Dash running. It was going to run the teen over only for a hole to appear and the teen fell into the orb where he spun violently as Violet floated along and out of sight. Violet disables the shield when they reached an alley and she fell down on the teen as Dash skidded to a stop before rushing back to the alley entrance and watched the robot as Frozen, Mr. Incredible and Helen was distracting the robot for the moment. Violet fell of the teen as his mouth sudden Y bloated and he went to the side and proceeded to empty the contents of his stomach behind a dumpster. Violet stood and asks, "Why is that robot chasing you?" She then dodged to the side as a robot tentacle tried to grab the teen, only to be just out of reach. Dash looked up at the robot that was completely ignoring Dash and Violet. Dash suddenly shouts, "Why is it ignoring us?" The answer came from the teen who shouts, "I remember it being bigger. When it last tried to catch me, oh and it had 2 arms and wheels for legs." That was when he dodged a grab before coughing loudly and puking onto the robot as it tried to grab the teen. "Why?" Violet shouts at the teen. "Well," the teen starts before puking again, then saying, "There was this strange guy fighting another black monster like this, only he died shortly after getting stabbed by the creature. I broke it and then those weird soldiers started attacking me and after beating them up, I got away and hid myself, met a couple other strangely dressed people fighting the strange robot, he dodged a robot's claw again as he puked on it again, then I fell down a waterfall, avoiding the henchmen guys, and found a corpse where I saw this strange melted word on the cave rocks." It was that point the robot caught him when he puked again on the robot before shouting on the way out the alley, "Does anyone know where I can get some tasty ramen?" Before being flung into a building leaving an imprint of his body in the concrete. The teen then says in his upside down position, "I could really go for some ramen." Helen grabbed his wrist and pulled him away quickly before the robot could smash him and threw him to the side where Frozen caught him with an ice slide that brought him to a sitting position for Frozen to asks, "Why is that robot after you?" The teen simply says, "What is a robot?" Blinking in confusion before groaning and puking again to the side. The teen then says, "What is going on? I have never been sick and now the first time I can't stop puking." Before puking again as the robot returned to smash the teen into the ground with nothing to defend him. The teen left an imprint as the robot started smashing repeatedly, even as Frozen created a barrier of ice to defend the kid, while in the distance Syndrome started flying over the city to save the day. Mr. Incredible ran towards the robot before jumping into the air and body slamming the robot back, which caused it to roll, and then righted itself before the cannon on the side of its head extended and opened fire, knocking Mr. Incredible get launched back as the teen climbed his way out the smashed ground and shaking his head a little as he rubbed his head as the headache got worse. Violet rushed over and checked on the teen not finding a scratch on him as he took a wobbly step that she helped steady him as they quickly tried to get away from the robot that was focusing on Mr. Incredible, Frozen and Dash, who was throwing small rocks at the robot getting its attention. Helen rushed over to the two and proceeded to ask, "You okay?" The teen appeared hungover as he says, "I would really like a bowl of ramen right about now. Maybe 20, he states as in the background Mr. Incredible and Frozen were suddenly caught in 0-point energy as they were thrown away and Syndrome started blasting away at the robot, gaining several people's attention as people who had been recording the fight were shocked at the sudden removal of the two classic heroes violently as Syndrome started spouting off about being a new hero and clearly pressed a button on his wrist as the robot goes to grab him. Syndrome flew around the slow claw and pressed a button and punched one of the arms only for nothing to happen and then get his control gauntlet to suddenly be blasted off and had to fly away in terror. The robot then refocused on the teen. Helen simply asks, "Why is it attacking you?" The teen frowns in thought before suddenly asking, "Does it share memories between forms?" Mr. Incredible ran past hearing the question and shouts back to them, "It learns the longer we fight it." The teen frowns before saying, well there you go, it is holding a grudge then. He suddenly grabbed both Violet and Helen in his arms and jumped straight up over the claw that was going in to stab him and landed on the claw as it was retracting. He dropped Helen and Violet to the sides and grabbed the claw as it started to shake him violently, leaving the robot completely defenseless as it was distracted by the teen. Violet looks at this and asks, what do we do? It was that moment when Mr. Incredible, after being knocked back from the robot's wild swings, suddenly shouts, Syndrome's remote. While raising it into the air, getting the robot's attention, and then was slammed into the ground violently enough to drop the remote control. Ash quickly ran past and ran off with the remote control before getting it to his mother as Frozen starts freezing the robot. The teen was still getting slammed onto the ground before suddenly started punching the damn claw, quickly causing said tentacle to glitch and the claw to suddenly detach and fell to the ground before another tentacle backhanded the teen away. The teen shakes his head as the headache was just getting worse before forcing the claw open to see Helen to the side, trying to deactivate the robot with Syndrome's controller. The teen stood up and says, do we have a plan to beat it? The answer came from Mr. Incredible was thrown towards them, leaving a groove on the ground, and mutters, the only thing that can penetrate its armor, before looking at the claw and says, is itself. We need to use this claw to destroy it. The teen looks to Mr. Incredible and asks, is that it? He received a nod before the teen sighs and with one arm glowing with golden flames, lifted up a claw and aimed at the robot orb as Frozen was stalling and says, why didn't you say that earlier? Before throwing the claw at high enough speeds for the claw to go straight through the robot and a building before crashing into the middle of a park 20 blocks away. The Incredible family looked at him in shock as the golden flames dissipated as Frozen landed next to them, causing the teen to ask, could I please get some ice, my head is killing me. Frozen made a chunk of ice for the teen before they were all surrounded by civilians who were taking photos with their phones and camera. The Incredibles family posed for a couple shots while the teen just took a seat on a rock with the ice to his head. No one getting a clear image of his head. Mr. Incredible, Frozen and Helen, who many people were calling Elastigirl for some reason, were signing autographs as a government cleanup crew arrived and started containing the area as a limo arrived and an elderly gentleman stepped out the back and says, Mr. Incredible, Elastigirl, we need to talk, bring the kids. Frozen, I will just ignore you being here, so get going. Violet stepped over and give him a hand into the limo, where he sit between Dash and the elderly man and across from Helen, Violet and Mr. Incredible. The elderly man says, tell me everything. With that, Mr. Incredible explains everything about Syndrome and what he had been doing since 3 months ago, while explaining what happened to about every missing hero from the last few years. During this explanation, the teen learnt that the elderly man's name is Agent Dicker, who then asks, so who is the kid? The teen was distracted by feeling sick from the drive and Dash playing with a window, opening and closing it. Mr. Incredible simply says, he was inside a pod being drugged with cobra venom, not sure why, though apparently it only made him drunk. Violet was shocked at this as the teen was rubbing the headache away. Dicker simply says, well, next time Syndrome sneezes, we will be there with a tissue and a pair of handcuffs to slap him with the book. Helen, who had a phone at her ear, was telling Dash to stop before suddenly he started talking about how cool this vacation had been. Helen though had Mr. Incredible listening to a message from their babysitter, which became serious when suddenly they ran out the limo quickly when Helen said, I didn't get a new sitter. With that, the 4 family members ran inside. The teen slowly stepped out the limo when he noticed that the roof was suddenly blasted out. The teen threw away the ice and jumped to the roof before tackling Syndrome, who was holding a baby. Helen was panicking below as Syndrome struggled with keeping the baby in his hands and the teen having a strong grip on Syndrome's arm. Instead of flying straight up, Syndrome was being pulled to the side over houses. Above them, a jet was just hovering above the Incredibles' home. Syndrome, the teen and the baby crashed into a small park to the side. The baby was in the teen's arms as Syndrome recovered and pointed at the teen and capturing them. Syndrome shouts, you have been a pain in my side since you suddenly showed up on my island. His teeth was gritted as he tried lifting the teen and baby into the air, only for nothing to happen except for several cracks to appear along the ground. Syndrome gritted his teeth as the teen started walking toward Syndrome, only limited movement from the 0-point energy. Syndrome was starting to panic when suddenly the teen had Syndrome's throat in his hand and lifted it into the air and says, did you just try to break a family apart? Syndrome's face was filled with fear as the teen got a little too close and says, I don't know what your problem is and I don't care. But you are probably the worst person I have ever met. Syndrome was suddenly in the teen's face as his eyes turned red with slits and a crazy smirk, want to know what I did to the last jerk who did that? He then whispers into Syndrome's ear before suddenly head-butting the villain to the ground. The baby then laughed at that, causing the teen's eyes to turn blue and ask, hello, little guy, are you hurt? The baby laughed and started playing with his cheeks as Helen arrived with Mr. Incredible chasing after Dash and Violet to see the scene of the teen playing with the baby. Helen arrived and says, Jack, the baby turned to Helen and reached for her as suddenly the teen gave Helen her baby. Helen looked at the teen and says, thank you. Hey, you guys got me off that island. Plus I hate the idea of breaking up a family, the teen states as Jack laughed and reached out to the teen before climbing out Helen's arms and almost fell only to be caught by the teen, who says, careful little guy, you don't want to fall and give your mother a panic attack. Helen looks at him strangely before he says, trust me. I have seen mothers upset when fall over sitting down on a mattress. Mr. Incredible simply says, we should take this back to the house. Which we will be needing to start packing. Ash whines as he says, what? Helen sighs too and says, you can blame your father, supervillain knows where we live so. We are moving. The teen still carrying Jack followed them back to the house while dragging Syndrome along the ground by his ankle. They find Dicker making some food and they notice some strange damage done to the property, the teen noticing the baby footprints scorching the ground. Helen sees Jack giggling in the teen's arms and asks, could you please keep an eye on Jack while we all change? The teen simply says, sure, before walking over to the kitchen and sees an apple and a banana and a small bowl where he makes a simple baby food in a small ball that he prepares with a single hand, causing a blue glow to appear in his hand that caused Jack to be entertained as he was clapping. The teen then asks, you hungry? Jack just laughed as the teen took Jack and the bowl of fruity mush and a spoon. The teen fed Jack accepted the spoon and really enjoyed the food even eating without prompting and was all eating easily. This was the scene that Helen found the pair while wearing what a middle-aged mother would wear normally. Followed by Mr. Incredible wearing shorts and a green shirt who was also surprised at this. They walked over to Dicker as Violet and Dash came out the room and the two went over to the destroyed lounge and sat with the teen where Violet simply asks, what is your name? The teen blinked at Violet in confusion before he realized she was telling the truth and says, sorry, I am Naruto Uzumaki. I don't think I ever got your name. Violet blinked before chuckling and says, Violet Parr. How did you see me on the island? I was invisible. Naruto fed Jack another scoop of fruity mush and says, wait, you were invisible? Violet blinked in confusion and asks, how did you not notice? Ash simply chuckles and says, wow, you are funny. Naruto was looking at him strangely. Seriously, I have no idea what she meant. I saw a purple haze near those two perverts, Naruto states still slightly confused. Helen stepped over and sees that Jack had taken the spoon from Naruto and was scooping up the fruit mush and eating without help while Naruto appeared distracted. Helen then says, well, I wanted to say thank you for saving my baby. Naruto just shrugged at that, not really caring about getting praised. Iker finished making dinner for everyone as Helen says, would you like to join us for dinner? Sure, Naruto answered. Ash though had to ask, are we moving again? Helen sighs and says, yeah Dash, there is a whole island of bad guys that may know where we live. All because of paid heroics. Naruto looked down and saw that Jack finished his food and was licking the remains that he could not get with a spoon and chuckles before grabbing a tissue and cleaning up Jack's face. Helen seeing the whole exchange asks, have you taken care of children before? Some of the jobs I took as a student ninja was to babysit young children overnight or when parents had to leave their kids home to do some personal chores, Naruto states getting raised eyebrows from the Parr family. Violet frowns and asks, ninjas? Well, I guess you don't have them in this world, Naruto states good-naturedly. World? Dash questioned. Yeah, I was in a different dimension fighting my world's version of a goddess who wanted to kill every living person in the elemental nations. He became somber as he thinks on what happened before coming here. He then faked a smile and says, well, not that it really matters anyway, that was months ago. He lifted Jack over to the table, not talking about anything else about home. Iker had heard everything that Naruto stated before speaking to everyone as they took seats at the table. Well everyone, we will have you moved out by the end of the week. I have your statement Bob to give to my superiors. I already called the NSA to collect Syndrome or Buddy as he will be publicly called. They are also bringing in some tech guys to move the jet above your house. The question is what to do with the interdimensional ninja that we have been expecting for the last 30 years. That made everyone pause before Dicker says, Underknife, secret identity is Kakashi Haddock. Died 23 years ago when a group of supervillains decided to target the super school we originally set up for those with powers. His death resulted in saving 30 future heroes and the death in 10 dangerous supervillains. Including members of Boss Awesome's villain gallery. Bob was confused until he looked to Naruto who looked like he was struggling to hold back tears. Helen simply says as Violet goes to Naruto's side and was pulled into a hug, so other dimensions. Iker sighs and says, it has happened before, remember Cage. Bob and Helen groan at that name, while Naruto looks to Dicker, who continues, one Sasuke-cha. What did the team do? Naruto says in an annoyed tone. Everyone looked at him strangely as Dicker says, he basically went to kill the UN, end result was a bullet to the lower spine and then the death penalty. Naruto drops a tear and says, I thought I was the idiot, as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Dicker then continues, what I don't know is where the last member of your team is. But considering that Kakashi showed up 30 years ago and Sasuke was close to 50 years ago. You don't know where Sakura is? Naruto questioned. Or she did show up and no one found her, Dicker states as everyone gets a plate placed in front of them. Hard to do, she has pink hair, Naruto states as he accepts the plate of steak to eat. Naruto then asks, well after dinner I will go look for her. Helen frowns before looking to Bob and then says to Naruto, how about you wait until tomorrow? Or let Dicker check his sources for you go looking. I don't want to impose, Naruto states only for Jack to suddenly reached over to the spoon that he ate with and threw it at Naruto where it bounced off his head. Naruto looked at Jack who was glaring at Naruto. Naruto was continuing to stare at Jack, Helen says, it is not a problem. Plus you are in a world you have no experience in. Take it slowly, before you miss the underneath. Naruto looked at her with surprise before he nods and returns to the meal they were eating. Violet was looking towards Naruto while he was not able to see. Dash was trying to eat his steak without cutting it. Naruto with his knife cut the meat lightly in 2 directions before leaning back. Dash looked at him strangely before tapping the meat, resulting in the meal being perfectly cut mouth-sized portions. Bob looked to Helen again before he looked to Naruto and asks, so, he paused for a moment and says, kid, what did you do before coming to Earth? Naruto chuckles and says, I was paid to do jobs for clients who needed the help against bandits or just basic security. Though before leaving for a training trip, I mainly did chores that people did not want to do as a team bonding exercise. So you were a mercenary? Bob asks only to get a dirty look from Helen. Naruto did not notice Helen's look but simply says, we had mercenaries, ninja were more warriors with power. He raised a hand as a small orb of blue energy appeared before fading into sparkles that caused Jack to clap in joy. Naruto continues, some ninja came from families that had a shared power. Like Sasuke, his family had eyes that could copy the abilities of opposing ninja. Kakashi has the same eyes, but they were a gift from his best friend. A thought-dead member of the Uchiha family. With that Naruto stopped speaking before giving a fake smile while saying, so what is the deal with wearing bodysuits? Helen paused at that before chuckling and says, well our suits are designed to work with our powers. Mine stretches as far as I can, Dash's can handle his top speeds, Naruto snorted at that, Violet's suit can turn invisible, and Bob's can basically withstand the punishment that his powers normally draw. Naruto nods along with that before saying, well to each their own, as he finished up eating. Iker finished his meal as the NSA agents arrived and arrested an unconscious syndrome while his jet apparently flew to an airport. Later Dicker would inform them that a woman by the name Mirage called the NSA and gave them the coordinates to locate the island and gave them a way to send a team to lock the island down. Dicker said before leaving, give me a day and I will give you an estimate of when I can get your family moved. Bob simply says, thank you Dicker. Helen then says, sorry that Bob has been making your job harder than it needs to be. Dicker nods before saying, oh and Bob, I apologize for getting you that InsurCare job, they were embezzling funds and the man you threw a wall. Was actually wanted for insurance fraud since '99. Also reviewing what you went through I am surprised it did not happen sooner. Night, Dicker then left as Helen turned to Bob with an angry look. Bob sighs and says, I am sorry I did not tell you. I got Syndrome's offer through Mirage and they offered 3 times my annual wage. Helen pinches the bridge of her nose before Bob started explaining more. Look my former boss was stopping me from doing anything to stop a mugging. Not even to call the police and was treating the entire situation with humor and threatened to fire me if I left his office during his speech about cogs in a system analogy to the company following illegal practices. Jack was looking upset before Naruto decided to distract the baby by taking him out the room while the parent were angrily arguing. Violet and Dash left with him as he took Jack to his room. When the parents were alone though Helen pulled him into a kiss and says, you know I was suspicious that you were cheating on me. I should have realized that it was because you were doing something you thought was right. But seriously how bad was your job? 300 workers a floor, with me being in the smallest cubicle and daily meeting of my boss, complaining that I followed the contract of a client who was covered with proof stating that, Bob states with Helen in his arms. Bob then admits, well after getting paid to fight a robot to death, instead of going into work, I snuck into a train yard and lifted trains up to lose some of my gut and was able to spend more time with the kids. Bob was then stuck in thought as he suddenly suggests, maybe we should find a way for the kids to practice using their powers. To cut loose and de-stress. Helen frowns at that before asking, like. Bob kissed Helen's head as he pulled her into a loving hug, we can talk about that later. For now, he kissed her deeply as he carried his wife to their shared room. Late the next morning Sunday Par residence. The next morning Helen woke up in the arms of her husband. She was well rested before she looks at the clock and she realized that Jack was probably very hungry. She snuck her way out of Bob's arms and placed a dressing gown over her nude form before walking to Jack's room to find her baby not there. She walked towards the living area where she sees Naruto looking after Jack in the lounge before looking up to see the roof patched up, well the roof and tiles replaced the dry way untouched. She then went to the side to see Dash working on his homework with Naruto who was learning as he went. She then noticed Violet sitting with Naruto as he was telling her stories of his world. She reached the kitchen when she finally stopped and looked to the three Narutos and asks, "What?" "Shadow clones," one Naruto says from the kitchen as he was seen making lunch for everyone. That surprised Helen even more as she sees that Naruto was making homemade noodles, along with broth, vegetables and some meat. Helen sees this and asks, "What are you making?" "Ramen lunch," the Naruto in the kitchen answered as he started boiling the noodles. Naruto then says, "Oh, I changed Jack's diaper and figured helping Dash with his homework would give you and your husband some alone time that you two needed." Helen frowns before saying, "You did not need to, you know." Naruto chuckled and says, "Look under the underneath was one of my teacher's lessons. Can you guess his most important rule? Those who break the rules are scum, but those who betray their friends is lower than that." Helen answered, now understanding what Naruto meant. Naruto sees the Pars as friends. Helen then says, "So what do you plan to do next?" "I have no idea," Naruto admitted before saying, "I have no idea about this world. Too much to learn quickly and I would have to search the entire planet for my friend. If she even is sent to this world." Naruto then quickly changes the subject, "So superheroes that must be fun." Helen frowns before saying, "Not really. About 17 years ago Bob was sued for saving a man who was trying to kill himself." Naruto blinked at that before saying, "Wait, a guy was saved from killing himself and was deemed sane enough to sue Mr. Incredible. Then an entire train of civilians sued him for injuries when he stopped a train crashing when the tracks were destroyed," Helen admits. It was that moment that Bob wearing a dressing gown stepped into the kitchen and says, "Multiplication. That is a rare power." Naruto shrugs and says, "Actually it is an easy jutsu to learn. Though you just need enough chakra to do it more than a couple times. We were just discussing what happened with the train." Bob sighs and says, "Syndrome had a bomb on his cape when he wanted to be my sidekick. The only problem was that I did not want a sidekick and he refused to listen to me. He did not have any powers as well. Ah, and in a bid to prove himself he followed you everywhere and got in trouble for it," Naruto states quickly. "I was also getting married that day," Bob states. Naruto chuckles and says, "Well that sounds about right. I had a similar thing happen to me. The grandson of my village's leader was being taught the apparent shortcut to becoming the leader of the village. What he did not know was that there is no shortcut. Fortunately I convinced Konohamaru enough to take his studies seriously and declared himself my rival to becoming Hokage. After I taught him the move I made to defeat the old man." Bob chuckles and says, "What did you teach him, how to stab someone in the back?" Helen slapped his arm for that comment. Naruto chuckles and says, "No, I taught him my world's ultimate technique for dealing with perverts or men who spent the majority of their life abstaining from sex to become powerful ninja. Pity I never got the chance to teach him the one for females." Helen frowns and asks, "What was the technique?" "Turning yourself into a naked woman with smoke covering the naughty bits," Naruto admits, shocking Helen and Bob before he says, "The female version was naked males. Which worked on the female goddess we were fighting." He points at both the Par parents. Bob finally says, "I don't want you doing it around the house." Naruto chuckles and says, "I won't be, beside no one to use it on." Naruto then pulls out a couple bowls to serve everyone some ramen, while putting some to the side too that the Naruto with Jack came in and started turning it into paste for the baby with a blue glow. That Naruto took Jack to the table with Dash, while kitchen Naruto came into the room started serving everyone lunch. Violet came over and everyone started enjoying some ramen. After the first taste everyone paused before moaning in delight before Bob asks, "How did you make something so good?" Naruto chuckles, "Not as good as Ichiraku ramen, but they taught me a bit about making ramen when I was growing up." Jack was even eating the mush that Naruto made using some ramen and enjoying the taste. Helen was actually surprised that Jack was enjoying his food, even going as far as eating with his own hands. Helen then asks, "How are you doing that? He is normally a picky eater." Naruto shrugs while saying, "It is good food." Naruto's joke got a light laugh from Dash before they continued eating. Bob then spoke up, "So Naruto, where do you plan to go next?" Naruto was thinking on this answer as Helen glared at Bob. Naruto then says, "I was thinking finding a library or make a few thousand shadow clones to get an idea of the city and then maybe move on to search the rest of the world." Helen clears her throat and says, "Bob, can I talk to you for a moment?" Bob gestured that he wanted to keep eating only for Helen to glare at him, and the two walked out the room and away from the kids. Once they were out of earshot, Helen says, "We can't let him go off alone." Bob sighs and says, "What do you want me to do? Travel with him? We already had that issue with the island, and you thought I was cheating on you." Helen frowns before saying, "That is not what I meant. I mean we can offer him a place to stay before he accidentally gets arrested helping someone." Bob was confused before Helen adds, "That boy could have left us to rot in that cell and saved our daughter from some very bad people. Then he saved Jack from Syndrome." Bob had to nod at that, who knows what would have happened if Syndrome had gotten away. Bob simply asks, "What do you want to do?" Helen took a deep breath, "Let's hire him as a nanny or babysitter for Jack. Plus if we have to suit up." Bob nods at that before saying, "Well, what if he wants to do super work?" "He won't if we explain the laws against it," Helen explained quickly before saying, "Plus with Naruto here maybe the young super program will get renewed." "Young super program?" Bob questioned. Helen answered, "It was a program for kids who suddenly found out they have powers and no one to help them learn to use their powers without accidentally killing themselves. Didn't you ever get training like that? Super strength is a family ability. Though sometimes they are focused into different parts of the body, hence why Dash is so fast," Bob answered before they returned to the table where Dash was taunting Violet as Violet was pointing a fork at Dash. Naruto was looking at the two as he held Jack on his lap. Though when Dash started running around the table he was suddenly caught by Naruto by the back of his shirt and lifted him up off the ground, causing Dash to run at high speeds without being able to touch the ground. Helen smiles before saying, "Well Naruto, how would you like a job?" Naruto looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Naruto sat on a medical bench without his shirt. The only other person in the room was the doctor who was wearing a mask, apparently a retired hero who was working for the NSA as a medical doctor. Currently Helen Parr and her son was outside the room as Naruto was receiving a medical exam that should have happened a week ago. Naruto was calmly waiting as the doctor spoke, "Well Mr. Uzumaki, last thing we need to do is a blood sample." He revealed a needle and container. Naruto flinched at the sight saying, "I don't like needles." The doctor nods before attempting to collect the blood sample from Naruto, only as soon as it touched skin and had some pressure the needle snapped without entering his skin. The doctor frowns at this and asks, "By any chance do you have a power or ability that affects your skin?" "I can heal very quickly," Naruto admits calmly. The doctor frowns at that before simply stating, "Can you wait here?" Naruto nods and the doctor calmly but quickly heads outside the room where Helen was playing with Jack. The doctor says, "Hello Helen." "Craig," Helen greets before correcting herself, "I mean, Visor, how's the kid?" Visor, a hero who was a doctor and a bomb defusal expert with his hypervision that allows him to see in multiple spectrums and through everything besides organic matter. What the public know of this ability is that he could not see through different hybrid metals. Anyway, Helen was fine with him seeing her mainly due to one single fact: he is gay, and that was what got him ridiculed out of doing hero work. Though not enough to have him kicked out the NSA who know about his powers and like him around in the medical room and in the post room for possible bombs or traps. Visor simply says, "Whatever happened to him has affected his skin. Due to his apparent healing factor was being constantly used, the question is why. They were pumping him full of cobra venom at the time," Helen admits, causing him to frown. Visor frowns and says, "What was he sealed in?" Helen answers with, "Modified high pressure adapter, the same for deep sea divers on submarines." Naruto mentioned how the troll modified it to hold Bob. Visor frowns before his eyes widened, "Damn, it is going to be impossible to get a blood sample. His skin has adapted and probably become high strength." Helen frowns before commenting, "That explains how he survived fighting the Omni droid." Visor nods before stating, "Well, I better check on my patient before he runs away." Visor returned to his medical room to find Naruto staring at the screen of Visor's computer as it was showing a slideshow of oiled up men wrestling in a male-filled bar. Visor cleared the screen and says, "Yeah, there probably is some strange things that we find normal compared to where you are from." "Not really," Naruto admitted before commenting, "There was a time with my teacher. Made quite a bit of money performing for a crowd of women." Visor paused at that before asking, "How old were you?" "I had just turned 15, Naruto admits, and Visor shakes his head. Visor simply says, "Well, as far as I can tell there is nothing wrong, though you should avoid giant robot attacks." Naruto places his shirt back on and says, "Well, at least I did not have a needle inserted into my arm." With that, Naruto said goodbye and he walked out the room before proceeding out to the NSA's underground parking and out through a tunnel that leads out of the city before driving into the city towards home. Naruto was quiet for most of the journey until Helen comments while Jack was chewing his toy, "So everything intact?" Naruto frowns in thought before commenting, "I don't know, the doctor was distracted thinking loudly about you." Helen laughs loudly before saying, that would be the day, though most men get jealous when I can fold myself in half. Naruto chuckles and says, strange I knew a guy like that had his neck snapped. Helen frowns at that before asking, he must have done something bad. He tried to hug a girl to death, Naruto starts before commenting, death sentence when he tried to grope her in front of our homicidal superior officer. She had an unhealthy obsession with snakes and dango. Helen nods before commenting, well that is interesting. They then reached home, which was actually a motel with 3 rooms reserved for the Parr family and Naruto. Naruto sharing a room with Dash, Violet sharing with Jack, while Helen slept with her husband in the middle, keeping the teens separated. Helen parked himself and they walked up to the rooms. Bob had sold the company car he bought, getting a decent price for it, while the NSA sold their old home after Naruto repaired the hole in the roof and the strange damages throughout the house, all of which they could not explain. Helen carries Jack while they walked with Naruto up to the rooms. Helen checked on Bob and found him sleeping while guarding all their stuff. Helen shakes her head before the trio walked over to Dash and Naruto's room before Helen comments, well Bob is sleeping and the kids need to be picked up, can you watch Jack? Naruto says, sure, with that Helen gave Jack to Naruto and the two took a seat on Dash's bed as Naruto had been sleeping on the floor. Naruto sat on the bed with Jack where the two had some fun talking quickly while Helen left to pick up the kids while having a bunch of thoughts, the biggest being what to do with Naruto and the living arrangements. 6 weeks later, sports day at Dash's school just before lunch. Naruto sits with Jack with Helen searching her pack for Jack's food and Bob was watching the games being played on the ground as they sat in the stands. Violet was talking to what appeared to be talking with her friend about this day being pointless, while Dash was stretching before his race before waving to his parents and giving a thumbs up to Naruto, who returned the thumbs up. Helen asks Naruto, what is the thumbs up for? Naruto smirks before whispering to Helen, he is going to hold back until the second half where he is going increase his speed slightly and go for second place. Helen looks surprised while Bob looks at him strangely as Naruto states, it is a better plan than him listening to you two shout what position he should go for. Plus this is training in order to use his speed effectively without revealing himself. Bob states a little upset, why didn't he mention anything to us? Naruto smirks, I told him the story of my friend Rock Lee, he was the fastest ninja I knew, so fast that he could outrun light itself when he was serious. Told Dash I would explain how if he won second place in the second half of the sprint. Naruto then started clapping with Jack as Dash's race starts and Violet walked away from a red-headed boy with her hair tied back with her orange headband. Violet says to the boy, Friday, confirming their date. Violet sits between Naruto and Helen as the race starts. Dash did what he was told, he waited just behind the kid in second to last until the last 50 meters where he sped up lightly and coming in second place and pretends to breath heavily as the other kids are also out of breath as Dash gives his family and Naruto a thumbs up. They then watched a couple more events before a trophy giving ceremony while the barbecue was hosted for everyone with hot dogs and soft drinks for everyone. Dash got his second place plastic trophy and everyone had a good time. Naruto looking after Jack the entire time even as they were leaving. They walked to the car park with Bob and Helen congratulating Dash while Violet was feeling the teen angst until the ground shook and from the ground a large metal drill extended from underground and a mole of a man with metal hands and mole-like teeth started shouting about how he was going to take over the world, causing the Parr family to place their masks on and Naruto says, I will take care of Jack, getting supporting nods from Bob and Helen. They all quickly walked over to the side with less people removing the civilian clothes with their super suits on, Naruto collecting their clothes for them to use afterwards. Bob and Helen ordered Dash and Violet to move civilians, and Dash ran off with Violet, annoyed that their parents wanted them to protect everyone instead of fighting. Violet was annoyed enough that she threw her mask onto the ground, only for the boy to notice her without her mask. She panicked when the boy had fear on his face before Naruto placed the mask back on her face and pointed her back to the battle as the drill was digging back underground. Naruto brought Jack with him and says to the boy, hi, Tony right? Tony nods fearfully and says, don't tell anyone what you saw. Last thing you need is to be interrogated by a stranger for something you have no knowledge of. Trust me, chose the girl instead of fame, you will be happier for it. Naruto looks towards the side as Dash and Violet started running towards the buildings that started collapsing in the distance. Naruto turned to Tony and says, head home or if you watch the fight do it at a distance. Tony gulps and runs away quickly leaving Naruto alone with Jack. Naruto smiles at Jack as he says, well Jack, shall we follow you mom and dad? Jack clapped before Naruto lifted the stroller before the two went quickly towards the villain's tunnel and ran quickly through the tunnel and past the 5 buildings that fell into the ground, though many people were getting help from those less injured. As Naruto ran past, he created a couple dozen clones to help with wounded until him and Jack managed to reach the large drill while being 100 feet away, where a smaller drill was seen dropping out and speeding away in a smaller drill. Naruto created a clone to stay with Jack as the real Naruto got in front of the smaller drill, where he caught the drill by the tip and lifted it up, resulting in the motor of the drill was spinning violently, with the villain inside was screaming in terror while Jack clapped. The clone of Naruto followed the real Naruto as they walked down the tunnel where they see the drill had gone to the surface. Naruto and Jack jumped onto the streets where they see that Frozen had saved a train of people from crashing. Dash and Violet can be seen saving people from falling debris and being hit by the drill. Elastigirl was saving people from falling off a bridge before she climbs inside with Mr. Incredible as the drill was about to collide with the police station. Frozen saved the building while Dash and Violet went into the drill before the inside exploded. Before the police suddenly were around the same entrance, the Incredible family went inside the drill by police from inside the building. Naruto sighs before winking to Jack and jumps high into the air and threw the small drill into the large drill, causing the drill to continue to spin and have the police staring at the drill while Naruto sneaks inside and quickly grabs the family and vanished before the police returned to arrest a family of supers only to find them missing and a note placed where they could all see. When the note was recovered it read, "You're welcome," causing the police to call the NSA while the supervillain the Underminer was arrested by the police who took all the credit even though the public had recorded the entire incident and uploaded the videos on the internet, proving the news and police wrong. At night, motel Helen and Bob's room. The Parr family and Naruto were enjoying some Chinese as there was a knock on the door. Helen answered the door to find Agent Dicker staring at the family. Dicker spoke, "Why did you all get involved?" Bob simply says, "We were there and ready to help." Helen then spoke up, "What is wrong?" Underminer was caught. Dicker sighs and says, "The police and anti-super senators are using this as a reason of why this all proves that supers should not be reinstated. My division is being shut down and I am being forced to retire." Bob and Helen head outside to speak with Dicker. Violet sighs loudly before looking to Naruto as he fed Jack. "What did you do with Tony?" "Talk to him calmly," Naruto answered. Violet sighs loudly before commenting, "Well, I told Dad what happened." Naruto nods in understanding and says, "Well, I am sure that everything will be fine. It is not like they have a machine or something that can erase his memories." Violet nods while Dash gags with Jack mimicking him. Dash comments, "Please you guys make me sick." Violet rolls her eyes before she comments, "Grow up." Naruto chuckles and says, "Don't worry Dash, in a couple years, you will be making Jack sick of you talking about the girl that has fallen for your superhero identity and would never give your secret identity a chance." Dash blinks at that before commenting, "So like Violet." Only to find himself inside a bubble causing him to shout that no one can hear. Naruto and Violet chuckle at that while Jack was openly laughing. What the three Parr children did not know was that he was listening to their parents talk with Dicker. The conversation was mainly how the agency was being shut down and the fact that they would only be able to stay in the hotel for a couple more weeks and Bob informing Dicker about Tony that he would handle it. Dicker left leaving Bob and Helen to talk by the pool as the sun had set. They were speaking about the future, how Helen could work in the private sector while Bob took care of the kids. They joked about everything as Frozen arrived and spoke about meeting a wealthy and legitimate businessman, wanting to meet with old school supers and wanting them to see them in their original super suits. Bob and Helen returned to the room where they finished their dinner before Bob says, "Stay out of trouble you four, your mother and I will be going with Lucius to see an old friend that arrived in town today. We should be back by midnight, stay out of trouble." What the kids and Naruto noticed was that they were seeing strange boots and overcoats that made them suspicious. But that the Parr parents left the fort to watch television for the night. Violet then asks as they reach the door, "Where are you going?" With that Bob and Helen started making obvious comments about going out for an obviously secret reason. They left in 5 minutes of silence followed before Violet comments, "They are up to something. Probably has to do with a wealthy guy that wants to speak to them about making supers legal again," Naruto states as he rocks Jack to sleep. Naruto then looks to Violet and Dash as they were shocked, "What? How do you know that?" Dash questions. "I heard them," Naruto states calmly, getting a pair of raised eyebrows. Naruto then continues, "They should be fine." He places Jack on the bed to sleep and says, "You two keep an eye on Jack. Where are you going?" Dash asks. Naruto smirks and says, "Just want to check on something." With that Naruto quickly left and walked around the corner of the motel before leaping to the roof and running into the city using the rooftops. Naruto reached the police station that had a drill almost crash into the building. The drill still remains as Naruto changed his form into a jester as he snuck his way into the police station where he made his way to the interrogation rooms where they find the Underminer uncuffed and speaking from the police chief about the failure to rob the bank and the loss of the police's share of the cash. Naruto smirks before pulling out paint from behind his waist and quickly and without being noticed. When he passed the changing rooms he filled the male uniforms with itching powder, the female uniforms were modified so that they dropped a size while being worn. Naruto chuckled as he passed several police officers arriving to start their shift. Naruto then went outside and quickly started painting the outside of the building, getting filmed by bystanders and missed by the police. The end result was the words, "You all fail at protecting the peace and all for money." Naruto was happy with the results before speeding around the city and vandalizing every police car that he passed, constantly writing slogans about their views of superheroes and how they are backwards in thinking. Naruto returned to the motel 10 minutes before Helen and Bob, who found him playing solitaire while Violet, Dash and Jack had fallen asleep. Naruto looked up to the pair where they see that their kids were asleep and that Naruto was still up and they turned the television off as they left for their own room. Naruto heard them talking about what happened at the meeting, apparently they wanted Elastigirl to start them off and Bob spent the entire time they were getting ready for bed until Helen eventually used the phone and accepting the job. Naruto frowns but takes his spot on the ground to sleep the night. NSA early morning. Agent Rick Dicker sighs as he finishes the remaining paperwork that he has had pending, along with some new paperwork relating to the sudden string of pranks the police station that was almost run over with a drill. The building was covered in glowing paint that disturbed many in the agency, as the building and several police cars had been vandalized with words relating to being allies of villains. Though the press has been loving the female police officer's wardrobe malfunction, some even switching out for the itchy men's versions just so they would not be ogled by teenage boys. Dicker shakes his head, he had just finished with a Tony boy from the school, it was harder than the babysitter incident in that Tony did everything to change the subject while flat out denying what happened when he saw Violet without her mask. Eventually Dicker explained who he was and what exactly was happening. Dicker sighs again as he eventually got Tony to explain what happened minus seeing Violet without her mask, even being a strange teenage boy, commenting about if he did know her, he would not have forgotten a girl as curvy as that superheroine, even making jokes that would get him slapped. Dicker sighs he has no idea what damage that occurred from the memory erasing machine that was currently being dismantled due to safety reasons. If the device was reverse engineered it could be a dangerous weapon. Dicker then placed the comments about Tony in his file, believing that it would be needed in the next couple days. Dicker finished signing the final document to make Naruto a legal citizen and had the documents rushed delivered to the Par's motel room. Naruto's room at the motel an hour later Saturday morning. Naruto awakens to the sound of the television and cartoons playing on the television. Naruto looks to Dash as he was eating a bowl of sugar bombs as he stared at the box. Violet awoke annoyed with her brother before smirking as Dash groans as a Saturday morning news report came on, only for Dash to enjoy himself as suddenly he saw that the police station had been the victim of a vicious prank the night before. Dash looked to Naruto and asks, "Did you do that?" "No," Naruto childishly comments before smirking and says, "It was the ninja jester that confused everyone until they heard a giggling from the fridge and a over-the-top jester laughs and waves at them before turning to smoke." Violet sighs and says, "Boys," while shaking her head. "Girls," Dash comments mocking Violet. "Ninjas," Naruto shakes his as he mocks both as Jack laughs loudly and crawls over to Naruto to be picked up. Naruto smiles and does just that before Jack poops himself while laughing. "Babies," Naruto mocks getting a laugh from the three while Naruto goes to change Jack's diaper. Helen walks into the room and looks to her two kids and asks, "Where is Naruto?" "Changing Jack's diaper," Violet answered. Helen nods before saying, "Well, I have good news, Dicker finally sorted out Naruto's paperwork and I have a job where we are getting to stay at a place to stay." Dash was the ecstatic while Violet asks, "What kind of job?" Helen refused to answer and instead says, "Get dressed, we leave in an hour." Helen started to leave the room when Naruto spoke up. "Want me to pack everything in my scroll for the trip?" Helen smiles and says, "Thank you." Naruto nods and recruits Dash to help him in exchange for some training, though he had to do it in a specific way. He was not allowed to slow down as he did everything and he had to do it alone. 10 minutes later all they had left to pack was Mr. Incredible's super suitcase. Naruto sealed the last item. Dash then asks, "So," his breathing heavily, "what training are we going to do?" "You just did it," Naruto smirks at Dash's shock, but before he could comment, using your speed with extra weight means that you get faster as you go without the weight. Dash blinked as he went to the bathroom to get dressed after Violet left after getting dressed. Violet, having heard what Naruto said, asks, "Was that the truth?" Naruto smiles and says, "Of course, when he starts training properly, he will be zooming from one end of the city and back to the other." First though there is one skill he needs to learn, Violet raised an eyebrow in curiosity, how to sit still. Naruto made it sound like he was filled with wisdom before Violet burst into hysterics that Jack joined in. Naruto simply smirks at the two before Violet left the motel room with her pack. Dash ran out the bathroom with his pack while Naruto packed Jack's stuff and then carrying him out the room, near where Helen and Bob were talking with Violet and Dash. Helen sees Naruto and asks, all packed? Naruto notices that she was holding what appeared to be a brown post pack. Naruto simply nods as a couple minutes later a limo arrives and they enter the vehicle, where Jack sat with his family and Naruto sat with the driver. Everyone would wonder why they did not take Helen's car, the answer was simple, as that Naruto had collected the car inside a scroll for the trip. Naruto was quiet with the driver for the whole trip until they reached the hilled forests of the city and where the phone rang and Helen answered. Naruto tuned out their conversation while he quietly started to get a feel of the region they were entering. After an hour of driving they arrived at what was a mansion that faced away from the city. Naruto looks at the building strangely as the butler gives them the keys before unloading their luggage before driving away. Naruto calmly walked with the Parr family into the house where Dash explores at his full speed before shouting about a pool and falling in. He then appeared in a balcony above them where he found a remote that created a waterfall from the roof. Followed by raising a love seat with fireplace then a television. Dash then continued pressing buttons causing the three couches to fall into small pools in a panic before putting the remote away and ran to find his room. Naruto chuckles and lifts the couches out while using chakra to remove all the water from them and place the couches on the floor quickly. Naruto then looked around and proceeded to find a spot to sit down and waited for everyone to pick a room until he hears a vehicle speed away from below and into the woods. A couple minutes later Bob returned with Jack with an unreadable expression as Naruto noticed, "You don't need to be jealous, I mean your wife has lots of experience fighting crime." Bob sighs and says, "Look, I don't like you." "A given," Naruto states agreeing with Bob. "But we have to make this work so that Helen can't succeed so that," Bob starts before Naruto raises a hand stopping him. "I know, this is important. My dad felt the same way," Naruto states with a somber look. Bob was silent before commenting, "You never did explain about who you left behind. Were you close with your parents?" "Nope, they died the day I was born," Naruto admits finding that he could easily admit that. Naruto then continues, "And before coming to this world the man who was the cause of their death sacrificed himself so that I could live. Crazy thing is, Sasuke and I were meant to free everyone from being eaten by a tree. Two sides of the same coin and yet he decides to follow in his ancestors' footsteps." He was really somber. Bob simply says, "You sound like you could use a drink." Naruto shakes his head, "Won't work, not even chakra-enhanced alcohol could affect me." Bob sighs and says, "Damn, I don't envy you. Though there is one thing I have to ask." Naruto looks to the strongest father in the city, "How many people have you killed?" Naruto spent the next 5 minutes thinking on that answer before asking, "Does talking a person into sacrificing themselves for the right reasons count?" Bob nods in the negative and Naruto says, 3. Bob looks at him strangely until Naruto adds, "One was an organ-stealing immortal, another was this guy who petrified people with this glove, and the final one I am not sure that he died, just that he was knocked off a cliff." "I was not expecting such a low number," Bob admits. Naruto shrugs and says, "I reached double digits in talking people to sacrifice themselves before I ended up here." Naruto rubs his head as the two sat on the couch, while Jack crawled over to Naruto and placed a hand on him in babyish support. Naruto patted Jack's hand and Naruto mentions to Bob, "Well, I think I should start Dash's training. Feel free to join us, you too Violet." Violet stepped out from behind a wall sporting a light blush. Naruto walked outside near the pool. "Dash. Time to train." Dash sped outside and was ready for the training wearing his super suit. Naruto looked at the excited Dash and says, "Okay, Dash, we are going to start with a simple exercise that everyone can join in." Naruto dropped into a sitting position with his legs crossed and says, "Meditation and breathing exercises." Dash sighs loudly and was about to head inside to be lazy until Naruto comments, "With the breathing exercises you would be able to run further, harder and recover quickly so you can run again." Naruto opened a single eye as he continues, "Plus this will assist you with using your speed without moving." Naruto smirks as Dash frowns at that, but was curious in what he meant. Dash, Violet and Bob with Jack sitting between them, sat across from Naruto and all meditated at different levels of success, Dash fidgeting, Violet accidentally creating a flat circle below her and was slowly rising from the ground. Bob though eventually fell asleep sitting in place with Jack sleeping on the grass next to Bob. Naruto suddenly flicked a coin into the air as suddenly Dash shouts, "I can't handle this. I want to be able to run and fight bad guys better. How can I do that when I am sitting still?" Dash looks to Naruto and the coin that he flipped into the air as it was frozen in place 2 feet above his hand. Dash's eyes widened and his mouth was open in shock as he looked around the yard seeing leaves floating in the woods and birds frozen in place before suddenly everything started moving again as Dash calmed down. Naruto caught the coin before catching Dash as he shouts, "How did you do that?" "You did," Naruto states causing Dash's eyes to widen in shock as Naruto continued, "You see, the way you perceive the world is different to those without you speed. The human mind can perceive the world around them faster than they can see the world. It's like reading a book, one person can only read a page in minutes, others can read a book in under a minute. Now what would happen if you read every school book you had in under a second and then did your homework the next second?" Violet and Bob looked at Dash as he blinks before speeding into the house and then read all of his books he needed for homework and then did his homework shouting, "Finished." Violet follows Naruto in and Violet looks at the work and her eyes widened and she says, "Wow, you actually completed the work, some questions are wrong, but you actually used the correct math this time." Naruto smirks and says, "Well, when your teacher is as amazing as me this sort of thing happens." Bob walked in and was in shock. When Bob calmed down he asks, "How?" revealing that he was still in shock. Naruto answered, "You never thought that maybe Dash would try using his powers to finish his schoolwork?" Bob's eyes widened and he groans like a grown man who spent years trying to operate something that only needed the on button pressed. Bob sighs as he sits on the couch with Jack laughing, it would be a long weekend. Naruto was reading a random book on maths to help Dash with his homework properly, mainly studying up on his future studies, while taking notes for himself on how to help him with his powers, along with Violet's powers. So far the only thing he can think of for Dash is to give him some weights to train while he is at home and creating an obstacle course outside for him to run. Violet though needed some help in the way of staying hidden, a task he needs to think of a proper way of increasing her skill. Naruto looked to the entrance of the house as Violet had not left for her date as no one arrived to take her on the date. She was really sad as midnight came around and she was in tears before heading to the fridge with a wooden spoon and invisible as she left the kitchen silently. Bob was sleeping on the couch with Jack watching the television, causing Naruto to blink and stare at the baby, watching an old-timey sum about some guy robbing people before being beaten up. Naruto heard something outside along with Jack, whom stood and slowly walked to the glass door leading to the garbage cans outside. Naruto could sense what was outside and decided to leave it alone. Jack on the other hand disagreed as he phased through the glass and started attacking a raccoon. Naruto rushed outside awakening Bob in his rush before Jack was seen on fire charging a trapped raccoon. Naruto and Bob were surprised at the destruction that Jack was creating, so Naruto created water in his hands before blowing it towards Jack, dousing the young boy before Bob collected the baby as he fired laser beams from his hands before dividing into 8 Jack that ganged up on the raccoon until Bob collected the Jacks that shouted in baby talk before laughing at the retreating raccoon. Bob was the first to speak, "You have powers." And started celebrating as Bob continued, "You can phase through objects, burst into flames, fire lasers and multiply." Bob was getting slower with his words as he realized what is happening. Naruto simply states, "So more than one power that looks nothing like each other is not normal." Bob shakes his head no before Naruto comments, "Should we call Mrs. Parr about this?" "No." Bob suddenly shouts before calming down and says, "We need her to succeed so that we can continue hero work." Naruto blinks before stating, "Then we should figure out everything he can do. You know, before he does something that could injure him if we are not careful." But that Naruto holds Jack as they went back inside and discover that if Jack did not get a cookie, he would turn into a rage monster and starts biting Naruto until he gives the baby a cookie. Naruto pulls out his notebook and started taking notes on Jack as Bob was called by Helen and Bob suddenly turns on the television to see that Elastigirl had stopped a runaway train before Bob starts lying about everything being perfectly okay and that he can handle it. Not even mentioning Naruto during all of that before hanging up and Bob appears to start pumping himself up to help his family and ensure that everyone succeeded. Naruto though could sense of betrayal when it was shown that Elastigirl mentioned her day. Naruto saw a first-person view of the rescue from her view. Naruto asks, "Wait, is this how your new boss was planning to show the world you saving it?" Bob sighs as he says, "Yeah, they have miniature cameras built into her suit to film everything." Suit. Not mask. Naruto questions in surprise before he thinks on it and had one thought that he kept to himself at the moment. Bob simply states, "Yeah, couldn't even see them when we were told they were there." "You okay?" Naruto asks in concern. "I will be fine," Bob states before Naruto walks to Jack's room and proceeds to keep an eye on Jack as he was finally falling asleep. Naruto created a clone and sent it off to check something of interest while the real Naruto sat with Jack for the night meditating. But clone Naruto. The clone of Naruto speed into the city to locate a library that he breaks into the building before locating documents on Mr. Incredible, where he found what was really the problem for Mr. Incredible that caused Naruto to sigh why Mr. Incredible was jealous, and then finding out the other factors in why supers were banned before dispelling. The next morning, Par residence. Naruto was helping Jack eat his sugar bomb cereal as Dash complained as Bob swapped him to a brand filled with fiber. Violet sighs as she finally asks Bob, "So where is mom?" "She is working," Bob states as he goes to put the milk away. "Doing what?" Violet asks. Naruto answered, "She has been hired by a very wealthy businessman to dress up in tights for the entertainment of thousands." "What?" Both Dash and Violet shout as they spit out their breakfast. "Paid to do hero work while it was filmed by a hidden camera on their person," Naruto states before commenting, "What did you think I meant?" Getting 2 blushes and an annoyed look from Bob. Naruto then comments, "If you want proof, apparently her big comeback was saving a train filled with people without a single casualty. Last person to do that was your father before supers were banned by corrupt government." Bob was about to question Naruto before suddenly noticing the school bus and directing Dash and Violet out the house to catch the yellow bus to school. Bob then came back and asks, "What do you mean corrupt government?" An attempted suicide turns into a lawsuit against the man who saved his life, Naruto states, "Legally you should have won that, as the man was disturbed and needed to go in for counseling. The train victims only sued you after they would have recovered from whiplash caused by the train stopping. Oh, and you know that man who tried to commit suicide. He never tried again." Mr. Incredible blinks at that before asking, "How do you know all of this?" Newspapers at the city library, along with obituaries around the country. That internet is an amazing piece of information gathering. Though it gets worse when you compare it to some of the news articles about other supers around the same time. One of which implicated you for endangering a child, Naruto states. Bob sighs and says, "Look, even if I wanted a sidekick, the minimum by law at the time was 16 and I would have had to file paperwork, and at the time a sidekick without superpowers would have meant I was benched for 6 months preparing the kid to fight super villains." Naruto nods before stating, "Well, it gets better, I looked up recent superheroes, we have villain turned hero in Metro City. A small town hero who is invulnerable, a guy in a metal suit that started in a place called New York who moved, and a group of heroes working in a place called San Francisco. I even found a copy of the old laws and the current laws, and get this, no super can continue hero work with superpowers or for the government, specifically. Meaning what Mrs. Parr is currently doing is 100% legal." Bob shivered at that before Naruto continues, "Another part of the laws, you can't use your powers for superhero work, but you can use it for actual workforce work. In your case, you could have gone into construction or even firefighting." Bob was stunned and visible upset as he asks, "What the heck is wrong with the government?" "Who knows, it is your world not mine," Naruto states before frowning as he lifts his left hand to reveal the angry Jack biting his hand for a cookie. Naruto just stares at this for 5 minutes and sighing as Bob helped him. Naruto states, "I am going to head for the store. Get some supplies." With that, Bob nods before giving Naruto $50 before Naruto gave a quick salute before vanishing in a couple leaves left in his place, causing Jack to clap in amazement. That afternoon, Par house. Naruto returned before Bob had to leave to pick up Dash and Violet from school. What Naruto discovered was a war zone that even made Naruto pause as furniture was destroyed, and that Jack was staring at the television and Bob could be seen trying to fix the damages while Jack was distracted. Naruto sighs and says, "Okay, I will handle this, you go pick up Dash and Violet." "We can't let them see this," Bob states as he made the mess worse as he tried to pick up the shattered plates on the ground. "Go, I got this." Naruto's order was met with a nod before Naruto started cleaning until Bob rushed out the door and Naruto sighs. Time to rally the troops before summoning 10 clones of himself to speed around the house and fixing everything and using his chakra to repair the plates by fusing the pieces back together before speed cleaning the house to a clapping Jack. In the end, Naruto dressed Jack and went outside with a ball and had Jack roll the ball between the two, giving Jack a chance to work off the extra energy so he would be tired when bedtime came around. Which was the surprise. Bob found the house clean and a second cookie jar triple the size, if the big one filled with cookies that were actually the healthier and baby-styled alternative for him. Bob just smiled at the sight of Jack having fun, while Violet went straight to her room, while Dash used his super speed to finish his homework, check his answers before redoing some questions, and then reading his school book to write a report for school. He finished his assigned homework before noticing the total 30 seconds it took for him to do his work before he went outside and played with Jack, as there was nothing for him to do for another hour before his favorite show came on, The Adventures of Captain Fancy and the Dandy Force. Until then, Dash enjoyed some talking with Naruto about his future training. Naruto simply states, you know with your speed and ability to learn you could in theory develop skills to save lives. I mean dismantle a car before criminals could get away, or if you study up on maps you could act as a fast response hero saving people and finding missing people. Ash simply counters that with asking, how can that possible work? Naruto smiles and says, well your mother had to destroy her new electric motorbike in order to catch up to a bullet train, in order to sever the train and activate the emergency brakes before anyone could be hurt. With the assistance of a navigator, you are faster than your mother's bike and a navigator would slow you down. So learn, prepare, adapt and win. Naruto smiles to Dash who nods in understanding. They continued to play before Dash's cartoon came on before Naruto and Jack joined him, causing Naruto to frown through the entire cartoon and says at the end, what the troll. If superheroes are frowned upon, why are they making these kinds of shows or at least making the police look competent enough for you to trust? Not making every police officer corrupt. Ash shakes his head, not really. Basically it is based off the comic books and they want it entertaining for kids. Then why don't they use characters like your dad in his hero days, he already has the theme tune, Naruto states getting a laugh from Bob from the side. The theme tune was used for charity and fan meets, Bob states as he spoke up. Bob then adds, your mother hated hers. I would too, Naruto states before sighing and says, well, I should get started on dinner, you two entertain Jack before it. Because after dinner he is getting a bath. Jack just laughs at that while Naruto starts cooking from scratch, making jam-filled buns for everyone to enjoy. At night everyone enjoyed some amazing shinobi food that fed everyone and lightened the mood for Violet who admitted, Tony apparently decided to forget that I ever existed. Bob nods before saying, well it could have been worse. I remember one time where your mother's identity had been discovered when we were dating. She was blackmailed into going on dates until Deckard could erase the guy's mind. Poor guy was pretty much a vegetable once Deckard was done, unfortunately that was when Violet glared at her father. You. Violet shouts. Naruto sighs and asks, how did Deckard erase memories? Bob decided that Naruto's question was safer than defending himself from Violet, it was a box that zapped the mind and erased memories that related to what they recall. Naruto nods before stating, that was a waste because I technically threatened him not to reveal anything or losing a chance he would regret. Violet blinks before being upset before she finished her meal and returned to her room in her depression. Naruto then comments, don't do anything to make this worse. Naruto's statement was ignored by Bob as Naruto took Jack for a bath. The next day Bob would make a phone call the next day getting the information that should let him help his daughter the next weekend. For now he would watch the news where he would see his wife save a major senator ambassador, which would accelerate their new boss's plans by a couple days. Montage of the rest of the week for Naruto and the Parr family. Naruto would go to the store a couple times before Dash and Violet would return home before returning and taking over looking after his super-powered baby. Bob struggled taking care of the hectic baby while doing his best to support Helen with her job. Ash would complete his homework and for the hour before his favorite show arrived and proceeded to teach him how to perceive his surroundings quickly, though Jack laughed every time a water balloon was thrown into Dash's face at different angles to help him with perception. Violet had apparently gone back to her self-loathing self from before meeting Naruto, which would be worse that weekend when Bob brought them to a family restaurant that a certain crush worked. Elastigirl wearing a grey version of her original suit was reading a newspaper after saving an important senator from screenslaver taking over her helicopters and after seeing a group of supporters protesting for heroes, with one kid holding a sign saying, "Screenslaver is still out there," causing Elastigirl to become worried. She rode the elevator at that moment before walking through a lobby before reaching her destination, Winston Denver's office, CEO of Dev Tech, with the CEO and his sister working in the room, while Winston was speaking on the phone before spotting Elastigirl and says into the phone he was holding, "Look, thanks for calling me back, but some business has come up. Meaning I am going to have to call you back." He hangs up the phone he was using and says, "You do not know how good that felt." He went to the intercom and says, "Jen, hold my calls." He focused on Elastigirl and says, "Great work with the train and saving the senator. My phones are off the hook with calls of people wanting to get into this." Elastigirl says, "I am happy you are happy." This caused Winston to frown and asks, "Aren't you happy?" Elastigirl was somewhat despondent as she says, "It is just, Screenslaver is still out there causing trouble and we are just playing his game." Winston frowns before understanding what was said and says, "Yes, that is understandable. We have you working alone out there and we risk civilians from getting hurt." Evelyn his sister shakes her head and says, "Just tell her." Elastigirl blinks before hearing Winston chuckles and says, "Well, it is a bit early, but I had to let you meet them." With that Winston led Elastigirl over to the meeting room next to his office and inside she finds a group of heroes in training that caused her to blink. Metroville sidewalk of the Happy Platter mid-afternoon Saturday. Naruto was nowhere to be seen as the Parr family walked into restaurant, Violet confused and back in her apparent emo phase of her life from before the syndrome incident. Once inside the restaurant, Violet asks, "Why did we drive to the other side of the city to eat at the Happy Platter?" Before she noticed a piece of paper drop in front of her to catch and reads, "Your dad is trying to fix his mistake." Violet frowns at the note as her dad spoke, "I thought we should try something different." He then started speaking to the receptionist, explaining where he wants his family to sit. Violet stared at him in suspicion as they were led to the booths and Bob to say, "Isn't this nice?" Violet simply says from across her father with Dash sitting next to her and Jack sitting in a baby seat. Violet simply says, "I have to say this place is rather boring." Dash, thinking he was funny, simply jokes, "The bored platter," laughing as the busboy arrived with glasses and poured everyone drinks. Violet was drinking her drink as the busboy, revealing himself to be Tony, says, "Can I get you anything?" Causing Violet's water to splash out her nose and coughing badly, both completely humiliating herself and panicked as she hides her face. Tony asks, "Are you okay?" But Violet simply shakes her head no. Tony cleans the table quickly as he was trained to do at his family restaurant. Bob takes a sip of his water and says, "This water is pretty good." "It is just tap water, sir," Tony answered before asking, "Can I get you anything?" Violet asked simply, "Where is the restroom?" Tony told her where they were and she walked away quickly without saying another word. As Bob was talking to Tony, Violet was standing in front of a mirror as she used paper towels to dry herself up. Violet was close to tears as a voice surprised her, "You okay?" Violet looked to the side to see a female blonde with long ponytails, a large chest, 6 whisker marks on her cheeks, and wearing the same clothes that Naruto normally wears. Violet blinks at the sight before asking, "Naruto?" "Hey," the female Naruto says in response. "You realize this is the girls' restroom, right?" Violet asks in shock. Naruto chuckles before admitting, "Well, after days of medical study in my world, I am currently 100% female when I am like this. Now I have answered your questions, care to answer mine?" Violet sighs and leaning on the wall near the door simply says, "Dad, he brought us here to get me a date with Tony. At school he thought I was a creepy stalker and now he is going to see me as a freak." Naruto chuckles and says, "Nothing wrong with being a freak, though I know you are not a stalker. You could just turn invisible and haunt all other girls he has an interest in." Violet chuckles at that before sighing and says, "Nothing really stopping me from doing it anymore. No longer have to be naked to be invisible." Naruto just smiled at that before commenting, "Feeling better?" Violet simply nods before Naruto comments, "Anyway, I hear the food is actually good here." Violet smiles and says, "Yeah, I guess I can give it a try." Naruto smiles one last time before saying, "I will see you guys at home. Something I want to show you." Naruto smiles again before vanishing into a puff of smoke, causing Violet to shake her head before walking out the restroom and back to their table to see someone else serving the table, while Tony in the back was complaining about Bob talking about Tony dating his daughter. Violet orders a burger along with Dash, Bob ordered a steak, while Jack enjoyed some chicken nuggets. But Naruto, after speaking with Violet, Naruto was walking through town in his male form, walked through town to relax. Only what he was not expecting to do was stopping outside a bank being robbed by a French terrorist throwing bombs at the police. Naruto ran forward quickly and kicked a small red bomb that was heading towards the civilians. Naruto kicked the bomb into the air as it blew, distracting the police officers as he rushed into the bank and found a mime with a bandolier of grenades. The villain shouts in French and tried to throw the grenade at Naruto. The grenade was a small handheld ball that glowed red. Naruto caught the grenade and held it in his hand as he grabbed the front of the French villain's shirt and held the two close, the grenade in a closed fist. All the hostages ran out as the villain was in a panic. Naruto simply whispered to him, "You like blowing up people? Who paid you to frame up Mr. Incredible?" The villain in a panic struggled before shouting, "Monsieur Fix. Son plan at a vendor des armes." Naruto blinked, realizing that they were speaking two different languages as the grenade went off, scaring the villain into fainting as smoke raised from Naruto's unharmed hand. Naruto dropped the dust and the villain and sped out the bank as the police arrived and found the villain unconscious. Parr residence that evening. Naruto returned to the Parr residence to see Bob watching the news with Jack, while Dash was reading his textbooks to understand fractions. Naruto notices Bob suddenly standing up and laughing at what he saw. The news anchor spoke, "Today, domestic terrorist and supervillain, Bomb Voyage, was apprehended today during a hostage situation." Police correspondents gave a statement detailing how they captured the criminal. Only witness testimony has brought up that a super was the cause of his apprehension. This entire incident has caused a rallying of pro-super legislation. Bob was laughing as he says, "Ha. Take that, you frog." Naruto frowns before asking, "He fainted after his grenade went off in my hand." Bob froze at that before asking, "What did you do?" protected civilians and tried to find out why he was in that bank 15 years ago, Naruto states before admitting, but I could not understand him. Bob groans and says, yeah, he can understand English but won't speak anything but French. What did he say? I only understood, fix, son and plan. Not much to understand, Naruto states though notices Bob clenching his teeth as Naruto says, relax, you are upsetting Jack. Bob releases a breath as he forced himself back on the cough and watched a movie broadcasted on television and was joined by Dash as they watched a space movie. Naruto walked to the kitchen and noticed Violet sitting at the island counter in the kitchen, reading a book as Naruto quickly made a large bowl of popcorn and drinks for the three watching a movie and then returned to Violet and asks, feeling better? Violet looks up and says, yeah, not that it is saying much. What did you want me to see? Naruto smiles and quickly says to Bob, Violet and I are going for a walk in the woods, be back in an hour. Bob waved them off, too occupied by the movie. Naruto smirks and leads Violet out the back of the mansion and out a back gate with a footpath. They walked for 20 minutes in the setting sun to see an old building covered in weeds. Violet asks, what is this place? Naruto smiles and opens the building, all the locks having been changed to reveal a workshop filled with car working tools and a service elevator that can move a car. Naruto says, I found this place day after we arrived here. He pointed to a door leading deeper into the hill as he says, basically that door leads back into the house right next to your room. Violet blinks at that before Naruto says, the elevator leads to a service tunnel that basically connects to the subway and leads outside. I think that whoever owned this house was a super. Violet nods before asking, so what do you plan to do with this area of the house? Was thinking a private area to get away from the terror of Bob and Jack, Naruto joked before adding, or maybe I could fix it up for you to use. Violet nods in understanding and says, I would like that. Computer, there may be a reclining chair to relax. Yoga mats, she then jokes, striper poles, she laughs at herself. Naruto smiles and says, hey, it is a good way to make money. And getting phone numbers, Violet looked at him and the two laughed harder. Violet calmed down enough to ask, so I did not see the entrance to this place in the house. Where is it? Naruto smirks and leads Violet down a hall going deeper into the hill until they found a manual elevator that Naruto cleaned up and made easier to use as the wind up the elevator shaft and found a small room with a single light fitting that matches inside the house. Once the two were next to the wall, Naruto pulled the light fitting and the two rotated so that they were in the house upstairs. Violet smirks at the new way to sneak out before she asks, what do you think I should do about Tony? Naruto smiles lightly and says, well, you originally just talked to him and organized a date, right? Violet nods before Naruto comments, so ask him out to get some coffee after school and I will distract your dad from making a bigger idiot of himself. How are you going to do that? Violet asks, unsure. I will threaten to tell your mom. Naruto smiles at that simple threat, causing her to blink before laughing at his plan. The two were leaning above the lobby of the house as they noticed that Dash went to the kitchen and made a mess to make some more snacks, causing Naruto to sigh and proceed to clean up the mess easily. Violet looks down and could only smile at the effort that Naruto was putting into helping the family, though her thoughts shifted when she remembered earlier that day when Naruto spoke to her as a girl and she blushed at the memory before shaking her head and heading to her room. Though soon after dark, Bob found he could not handle Jack without Naruto, as after learning Naruto beat one of his villains without him, so he took over looking after Jack and sending Naruto out to help people and improving super relations with the public. The end. Thanks for watching, also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.